All right, so how's everyone doing today? Good. So I'm here to talk about what's new in Newforms-Admin. And one question I want to ask everybody: who here used Newforms-Admin while it was still a branch? All right, cool. Just kind of get an idea of who's kind of seen what's going on that happened there. So let's go ahead and get started here. So what is Newforms-Admin? It was a branch of Django trunk that refactored Django.contrib.admin to use Newforms. Previously, it was using old forms, and there were a lot of problems with it in the fact that, first of all, it wasn't using Newforms, and second of all, that there was a lot of places where you just couldn't extend a lot of parts of the admin. So one of the goals for Newforms-Admin was to improve the API, also have decouple setting options from the model, because there was a lot of stuff that was being set in the model that really probably shouldn't have been, and I'll go a little bit more into that in the future here. For those who are keeping count, it landed in trunk at revision 7967, and that was a pretty big moment for a lot of people who had been using that branch for a while. They finally got it into trunk. So, and it's also a part of Django 1.0 that we just released this past week. This is a picture of the admin. I mean, nothing's changed in terms of UI, but like for example, here we have just some applications and models that you can add and change model instances inside this pretty much completely automatically generated admin interface. And all you have to do is to set up a few things, and you've got a fully functional, production-ready admin interface out of the box. So let me go over a little bit of what has changed in the branch. So like I was saying earlier, you no longer have to specify your admin options in your model or on the model fields. And here's an example of this. So for example, we have this article model where we have the two fields there, title and slug. And on the slug field, we have a pre-populate fields where we would just pass in a tuple of fields that you wanted to pull what was going to be pre-populated into the slug field on the admin. So we would do some JavaScript hookups and all that kind of stuff to make that all work. And also we have our inner admin class, which where you would specify your options that would control the behavior of the way that the change list worked, the list of model or in model instances, and various other options. And so what you would do is you would create yourself an application level admin.py module where you define your model admin classes. This was originally not the case for a while, and we had you would define your model admins in models.py, for example, only because that was one of the early loaded modules. But the problem with that is that we had a lot of cases where it would be called more than once, and if you were to be registering your model admins there, you would get already registered exceptions, which caused a lot of people a lot of frustration. So we ended up deciding on just using this admin.py module. And so inside that admin.py module, you would define your article admin, which inherits from the model admin class that you can grab just off the Django.contrib admin namespace. And you would import your model, which actually I'll show you why we need that in a second. And basically, for the most part, you can move over almost all the options that you have inside that inner admin class at class level on this article admin, mostly without having to change most of them. So for example, as you can see here, we have the pre-populated fields, which we pulled right from that slug field. So the name changed there, and now it takes a dictionary where you would pass in the name of the field that you want to put onto, and where you want to pull from, which is basically the same value that you would have on the model field. And one of the last steps here is to register your model admin classes to admin site instances. This is pretty critical because a lot of people don't realize that there's actually the ability to be able to just define your own admin site that you would typically put at project level or however, basically wherever would be most comfortable for you in your project. And then you could register your stuff there. So here's an example of how you would just register your article admin along with the article model on the default site instance, the admin site instance. I would recommend this particular method for reusable applications, so that way you can provide a generic interface in the admin for your models without people having to set that up themselves or creating their own admin site classes and hooking them in by themselves. And then the last step that we'd have to do in this what has changed kind of like to-do checklist here is to hook up your admin site instances into your URL conf. And so what you would do here is you would basically call this function we have called auto-discover, which basically iterates over your installed apps, and it basically imports the admin.py module, which then hooks everything up on the default admin site instance. And if you were to be doing it on your own, having your own admin site instances where maybe you would want to subclass other applications, model admins, you could do that there, and then you would be importing it here, so that way you can hook it into your where you want it to be located in your URL. So in this case, we just do the basic admin, and then we basically have a capture all syntax here in the regex, where basically all those parameters get passed into the admin.site.root view that hangs off on an admin site instance. So another thing that has pretty much gone through a pretty big refactor is edit inline. Edit inline gave you the ability to be able to basically edit models on other models pages, maybe through a foreign key and whatnot. So right now we have inlines. They now subclass an inline model admin, where basically that class has similar functionality as just a regular model admin. Things like widgets and some of this common options like the pre-populated fields. They all inherit the same thing from the base model admin, which gives the ability to be able to do things similar how you would do things in just your regular model admin, and you get all this functionality and ability to be able to customize the way that the inlines work. Django provides a stacked inline and a tabular inline out of the box, which is basically subclasses the inline model admin and then defines a template option. So you can control what template gets rendered in your inline, so you can basically change the behavior and the display of a particular inline as you see fit for your particular needs. So looking at an older install of Django, using basically we have an author model and a book model, where the book model has a foreign key to the author. And before you would specify the edit inline keyword argument on the foreign key, and then pass in models.stacked or models.tabular to be able to control the way that looked. So one of the other things that had been done that was removed with Newforms-Admin was the core keyword argument. Basically what happened here was you had to specify a core field which told Django which ones were basically required, and that's how it knew how to delete things based on when you were to delete those values out of the inline. So the way you would do it now is you have the book inline class, which subclasses from the admin.stacked inline, and basically you have a model option. You can just pass in the model of what you want to pass in there, and then you basically hook up that class on the author admin, and then you would just register the author admin like I was showing before. So you can have obviously multiple different inlines on a particular model admin, which makes it really easy to be able to have many different content that you can edit all on the same page. And so just to show you a quick example of what that looks like, basically you have an inline here where you have multiple forms that are being presented with different widgets that can be controlled independently, and how you want those to be displayed on the admin. And as you can see here, we have a new option or a new field on the inlines, which is the delete. So you can now control the delete through the interface, as opposed to having to delete maybe the URL and then it goes away. So, and it makes it really easy for the user and also just less work for having to deal with core. So I want to go over a little bit of what also is new that came over from Newforms-Admin. All the admin changes are good. That makes it easy to add your own behavior and whatnot. But there's also a lot of things that kind of a little more under the hood to the admin that are also on the public API that you can use. So we have form sets, we have model form sets, generic inlines, media definitions on forms widgets, and I'll go into each of these in depth right now. So form sets basically provide a simple API for handling more than one like form on the same page. So similar to the way that we just saw those inlines. This is basically the underlying implementation of inlines. And on the public API, we provide a factory function called Formset Factory, which you can use yourself. These form sets themselves, this is the basic implementation. They have no concept of models at this point. So in this case here, we want to be able to maybe add or edit this book form. And we want to be able to do maybe 5 of them or whatever. So we basically have a book form that we create. And then we pass it into the Formset Factory, which basically creates that form set for us. And then we can use that in our view. So in the view, we basically, this is similar to how you would handle most forms on any Django view, where we have the different cases for the post and the non-post, and the signatures are essentially the same, and you would just go through that particular condition and get to your is valid, and then you would just do something with that. So however you would want to handle that particular case once the data is valid. And we're just passing it into the form or into the template as form set. So inside your form set or your template, you would use you would iterate over your formset.forms and basically just display the form as if it's just a regular form that you would work with normally. So you can if you needed to get more granular with it, you can drop down into the lower levels of the form and be able to display fields individually or whatnot. So. Model form sets is basically just helpers for integration with models. So it's basically an API that sits on top of the form sets that deal with how to talk to a model. And so this is actually the real implementation of what the inlines are doing in the admin. There are 2 classes, the base model form set and the base inline form set, which handle the base model form set is the base of all this, where it basically deals with a query set. So you can pass in a query set on this particular class if you want to use it directly, but we provide model form set factory and inline form set factory to do the same things as that form set factory that I showed a little bit earlier. Another really neat thing that we have that came over with Newforms that actually basically allowed this to happen. This actually didn't happen on the branch. It happened after we merged into trunk, is that you can actually have generic inlines, which these are inlines that are just based on a generic foreign key. So you may have a generic foreign key on a particular model mapped over to whatever wants to use it. And it allows for a reusable inline that can be applied generically to model admin classes. So inside of this, we have a generic inline model admin, which is similar to just the regular inline model admin, but it has the behaviors for dealing with a generic foreign key on a query on a particular model that would be dealt with at a query set level. So we also provide a generic tabular inline and a generic stacked inline to coincide with what is already available there. Still giving you the same abilities that you can with the other ones, but just deals with a different data set and how it handles that. So here's a quick example of a model you may have. A generic image model where we just have an image field, and then we have the standard setup for a generic foreign key. And then what we would want to do is inside of an admin.py module, maybe in some sort of reusable application, you can define your image inline that would just subclass from, in this case, I'm just subclassing from the generic.generic inline model admin. And the reason being is sometimes you may or you may not want to enforce a particular style or a presentation of a particular inline on whoever is using this particular inline on their own models. So in that case, that may be a case where you want to say in some documentation that you need to specify a particular template or whatnot for that, or you could provide inlines for both cases that Django supports. Well, there's two different class level options, CT field and CTFK field, which are basically, they default to what Django defaults to on a generic foreign key, which is a content type and an object underscore ID. But in this case, I changed it just so that I can show you what this looks like. So another thing that came over with Newforms-Admin are media definitions. Media definitions gives you the ability to be able to define media, so CSS, JavaScript, on forms and widgets. It allows for simple reusable widgets, so you can create widgets that contain bundled up versions of particular JavaScript you may want to call, or CSS that has specific styling. The admin widgets use this so that they can be used outside the admin. They all have their own inner media class, which I'll show in a second. So that way you can actually reuse those really cool widgets that are built right into the Django admin somewhere else in your project on forms or whatnot. And this media definitions also applies to model admins and inline model admin. So you can define specific media on your own model admin. So if it doesn't feel right to do it at a widget level, it may be more appropriate to do it at the model admin level. And it supports the same declarative syntax, which looks like this. So we have a calendar widget, and we have the inner media class, where we can define a dictionary of CSS related bits, where we have the media handler part of it, so it could be all print and whatnot, because this is going to generate that HTML, and you can pass in a tuple of the different CSS style sheets that you would want to add there, as well as a JavaScript. The JS, where you can pass in as many different JavaScript files that you would want to render out. And the way you would interface with this is that this is actually written really well in the fact that all this stuff works completely well with inheritance. The form understands what the widgets have on them, and it will, when you call essentially like on a form.media, or in this case a widget.media, it would actually go down to all of the widget levels, pull all those media up. It would understand duplicates, so that way you'll have to worry about specifying something more than once, because sometimes it feels natural to have. You want to explicitly say that this one has this one, and you may not want to rely on some other widget that may need to be there for a particular bit of functionality for it. And then it just generates that HTML for you that you can just drop in on your templates. So. And this is my little lame attempt at trying to have one more thing. There's this really cool, one of the things that Formsets needs to be able to do, and one of the abilities of a form set underneath of it is it needs to understand what data has changed in a particular form on a form set. So in the inline, it wants to know if data has changed there. And so at the form level, this is something that's actually not documented, but it does have a public API. Is there on the forms we have a has changed property, which basically returns true or false if anything has changed based on the data you pass, bound data and initial data. And then there is another property called change data, which gives you the ability to be able to return a list of the specific fields that have changed. So, like I was saying about form sets in the admin, it doesn't save. It won't commit to the database forms that haven't changed. So if a form hasn't changed, then it won't do an insert or an update on those particular ones. So that pretty much comes to the end of this. I have some resources here that you can use. Yanis Lydell, who has been working on Django Mobile Admin, he had just recently this week finished this up to work with 1.0. Has some really good examples of how to extend the admin to do things that it should be able to do now. It basically provides a complete mobile admin interface to your regular Django admin, as well as the documentation. And on my blog, I have a Newforms-Admin migration screencast that that you guys can follow if you wanted to learn more about how to migrate your applications over to 1.0. So that's pretty much all I have. We would do a little bit of questions. Sure, I think what we want to do is go up to the mic. Thank you.
So I know this is a horribly terrible question to ask, especially right at 1.0, but now that we've got Newforms-Admin out and we've been using it in the wild for a while, where do you want to take it from here?
That's a good question. I think the admin definitely provides a great and easy way to be able to get things going, and there's still some places in the admin where it needs to be improved to add additional functionality. Like, for example, the change list, which displays the model instances so you can edit those or whatnot, needs a little bit of a refactor so that way you can control more of that particular behavior. It's much more accessible, so you can, if you wanted to actually define your own change list yourself, you just have to maybe implement some more functionality than what you probably should be needing to do. So I see a little bit more refactorings in those areas, probably in future releases.
I have a couple of questions. So if people are lining up behind me, then kick me away. But I'll go through them one by one. Can you go over? So you suggested for reusable apps that in the AdminPy, all apps register with admin.site, the main instance. Can you go over how the admin auto register thing happened in the main URL conf? Because I'm trying to figure out, well, if I want to put it here, but I want to also have my own instance, and then you said something about the auto register reading AdminPy in some of your screencasts. Can you go over like most of the logic of how it happened, so I don't trip
how
up?
auto discover works?
Yeah.
So I recommend for reusable applications to, like you were saying, register on the default admin site instance. The admin auto discover you would typically only want to use that if you are wanting to use the default admin site instance. So you're going to want to call that in the urls.py, just because that at this point is the best early loaded module that will likely not be loaded more than once. So it just iterates over your installed apps. So basically, any apps that you've designated to be installed in your Django project, it will iterate those and it will import that admin.py module, and then effectively making those register calls at that time. If you wanted to coincide another admin site on your URL conf, there's no limitation of saying you can have your own other admin site instances and then import them in your urls.py and then hook them up on their own URL. So you can have multiple admin sites on your project that may have different models, that may have different behaviors, or however you want to do that.
Still nobody. I noticed way before NFA was merged, I was actually using Data Browse a little bit, and and my feeling is just the API feels a lot similar to Data Browse. Can you comment more about that? Is it related?
I never really worked with Data Browse. The APIs, there are some similar concepts that are going on in both. The admin definitely deals with more of the write and the update bits of things, and the Data Browse handles more of the read public interface, non-trusted users kind of deal. I personally don't know what the future of Data Browse is going to be, but I could definitely see that there could be some sort of collaboration on APIs and get things to be more consistent.
Last question. This might be a bad practice what I'm doing, but in the URL conf, you said you had the .star. I actually capture that because I'm lazy. Well, for bad practice, I have admin stuff and stuff outside of admin referring back to the admin with the URL tag. Currently, capturing things and doing it the dry way with permalinks is not very fun for the capture all, because you basically have to specify the list of path of actions and stuff like that.
Because you want to be able to link to a specific admin view
from outside.
From outside, yeah. That's one of the things that, due to this particular refactoring and some of the changes that would need to be made in the URL resolver, that it makes it kind of difficult at this point. So that was one of the things that we plan to support, certainly. So.
Hey, I was wondering if you've seen any like creative uses of multiple admin sites in kind of real world. I'm trying to think of like some real world examples where that would come in really handy, and I was wondering if you'd seen anything out there.
I personally haven't. I know that there might be some really good use cases for having more of a basic admin interface where you may have people who just need to be adding content to a specific model, maybe an article model, and then having more of an advanced where you would have more advanced users deal with other parts of the system that you may be interfacing to.
Actually, I am using a real.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, and what we have is we have contributors in particular, and we have staff that's internal to our organization. And I've split out the two admin sites to allow contributors to edit any of their own information. And it's a limited set of models that they can get at and whatnot, and it works great because it's just
that's good to hear,
that's basically our whole user interface for the contributors right now. Is just this limited admin site, so it's really nice. I think there's a little problem with I didn't want to make them staff, and right now you have to be an is staff user to use them all. So
right.
I was looking at refactoring a little bit of stuff.
Yeah,
we have an issue out on it, so.
Yeah, it sounds like that could be. There might be some places in the code that could be made a little bit easier.
Yeah,
to do
I think
that.
so.
But you could definitely be adding or subclassing your own methods and all that kind of stuff, and may have to duplicate some more functionality. But at least there's at least one way of.
This answer just basically hooking a customized admin site answered all of our like user needs, and it's like
that's really good
for free. It was great.
Yeah.
So good work. Cool.
Thank you.
Hey, my question is about form sets with DjangoAdmin. So you were mentioning, Formsets Factory. I was wondering if there's anything, that model Formsets Factory has, or basically, base model Formset has that that base Formset doesn't have that admin is dependent on.
A form set works based off of initial data. Initial data that when you instantiate a form set, you pass in initial data is a list of dictionaries that you pass in, and based on that, it knows how many forms initial forms to show, and then you also can control the number of extra forms that you can do. That's all still the same. The only thing that the model form set does is it deals with it knows how to handle a query set.
Yeah. So I understand that. I'm just asking if is Newforms-Admin dependent on anything to do with model form sets, like saving?
Oh, is it adding any more functionality?
I mean, is a model admin dependent on the form sets being a model form set rather than just a?
It would be dependent in the fact that it needs to have the ability. It needs to have a save method.
Okay.
So if you were to implement your own save method, then that would certainly work. Yeah. It is dependent on the inline form set factory, which takes an additional keyword argument, which is save as new, save as new, which gives you the ability to be able to save and basically make a copy of an instance in the admin. So aside, if you're able to support that, then you could really do anything you want.
So to do something that isn't an inline form set in the sense that it isn't linked to a parent object, is that something that you'd have to hack a little bit?
You might have to override views to handle that.
That's what I've been trying to do. So
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
No problem.
Hi, I'm back. So I have two questions, if you're willing to field them. One, so one of the problems that I've run into some more with Newforms-Admin rather than the previous instantiation, I'm wondering if you have any suggestions for strategies on how to avoid this, is that the auto-discover oftentimes creates circular imports. And when the auto-discover creates a circular import, because of the stage it is during the the bring up of a request handler. It's before we get the really nice debug error message with all the back traces and the environment at each stage along the way, and it raises an improperly configured error. Because the URLs can't be imported, so it doesn't.
I believe that improperly configured was actually removed, and the exceptions that happen during the instantiation of the URLs.py should be bubbling up at the top now.
Okay, cool. Then I must.
Yeah, that was something that was made near the close to 1.0.
Okay, so I must not have seen that part yet.
Yeah.
In the development. Okay, the second one is so. It's awesome that we have access to the fields that have changed in the submission. One of the things that would be particularly awesome, sorry, I've been drowning in trying to do a very complicated template for Satchmo for using Newforms-Admin for order managers, which involves all sorts of denormalized data and like 20 related models and all sorts of great stuff. But one of the things that would be particularly awesome would be not just knowing which fields changed, but also the before and after data, so that in the change log we can say this changed from this to this.
Oh, so more like an audit trail kind of thing?
Well, but also on top of that, for example, one of the denormalized data that Satchmo keeps is inventory. How many things of these things have we sold and how many do we have in stock? So if you change an order and say that instead of 1, I want 2, I need to know that it was 1 before so that I can decrease inventory by 1 and increase number sold by 1.
I think that begins to get into some more specific use cases, and that if there's problems in handling in the way that we're doing things, that maybe there needs to be some places where you would have the ability to be able to hook into that kind of data.
Well, so I guess I'm wondering, do you know off the top of your head if there's at the point in the base model admin, we get to the save form or save form set or save model, that there's an instance of the original object lying around somewhere that hasn't had its values changed. So even through some sort of crooked sort of navigation of the object model, that you can get access to the object as it was beforehand without totally stomping on a lot of the base model admin functionality.
I'd have to look at the code to see. I think on save, because it requires you to actually create that instance or save it. Off the top of my head, I don't know. Okay, I'd have to look. All right. Yeah, hit me up later, and we'll take a look at that.
Thank you.
Sure.
So let's talk about form sets for a second.
Okay.
Following up a little bit on some of the earlier questions. We have right now, because form sets are used to do inlines, we have things like, show this many forms and show this many extra forms. I have a situation, which I think I've talked to you about more than once, where I have kind of a complex admin where I need to be able to do some inlines, and I need to be able to say, fill in at least, say, 3, but no more than 5 of this type of object. And right now, form sets, you have to go hacking down. You have to actually reach down, reset the total form count, initial form count, regenerate the forms, and do some really tricky stuff with can delete to try to convince the form set that this many forms are required. At any point, might we see a nicer API for doing that?
I would think so. I would think so, yeah.
Can I triage that for 1.1?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. So is that everything?
Are there row-level permissions in Newforms-Admin?
There's not like a bit that you can flip that everything just becomes row-level permission, but there are a lot of hooks in places where you can implement who has control over this particular stuff. And since you can control query sets and all that kind of stuff, you can control what gets displayed on the change list. So there's definitely the ability to be able to do that much more so than it has been before.
Yeah, one of the things I don't think that you mentioned it is you now have access to RequestUser because before it was like a nasty hack that you had to do with thread locals and stuff.
Yep.
So
yeah, you do have access to the request object when you're saving the form. So in the event that you want to be able to attach the user object that for the authenticated user onto a particular model instance before you save it to the database, you can do that with basically overriding one method and adding that one line of code and then saving. So I think that's it.
I'll just join in here with James on the pony list. The other one that keeps banging around is I don't want to use contrib.auth. What's the state of contrib.auth?
The only dependency, I think the only dependency right now that we have on auth is in the login view. So if you override the login view, you can basically get rid of auth completely. What's that?
Display and login. Also in display login form.
Display and login form. So yeah, basically you can define your own authentication for the admin however you like, using the basic authentication package you can use with auth, or not at all. So whatever works best, I would think. So. Is that all?